Hey everyone, in this video I'll be going through an introduction of how to use the bibliography manager JabRef. I use JabRef to organize all my paper references and for use with my LaTeX documents, which you can see an overview of in my Introduction to LaTeX video. While I'll be going into more depth in this video, there's still no way to cover every single topic, so I'll point you to the JabRef documentation, Overleaf, Wikibooks, Stack Exchange, and Google. I'll be including chapter timestamps so you can navigate easier to whatever section you're interested in. So go ahead and open up JabRef and it should look something like this. If you'd like to use it in dark mode, just go to Options, Preferences, and then down to Appearance, change it to dark theme, press Save, and it says that you have to restart. And so this is what it'll look like when it restarts, but I'm going to use the light theme for this video since I think it'll be easier for you to see. Now we need to create a new library, so we'll go to File, New Library, and it'll bring this up. And it's untitled by default, so let's save it and give it a name. So File, Save Library As, and we'll call this JTE_bib, save, and you can see it's called JTE_bib, and it's a .bib file. Before going any further, I just wanted to make a note about when to create new libraries. I used to create a new library for every document I was writing and would place that bib file in the same folder as my main text file. This is actually what I show in my Introduction to LaTeX video and what I do for my templates I've linked to on GitHub. And so over here, this is the folder that I was using for that video. You can see my text file right here, and you can see my bib file in the same exact folder. However, I will say that there are good reasons to structure it differently. Let me just tell you how I currently work in my actual non-YouTube life. I have a folder for all the conference or journal papers that I write called Papers Mine, and this is just in my normal documents folder, for example. And in this folder, I create a new folder for every paper I'm writing, and in those folders I have my text files and figures folders, etc., but not the bib files. In the Papers Mine folder, I have another folder called bib files, and it is in this folder that I save all my bib libraries. Then, in every paper's text file, I just reference those bib files with the appropriate path. I'll give you an example for why I do it this way. In my Papers Mine folder, we can see that I'm currently writing 3 papers, 1 about airplanes and 2 about Schlieren. The airplane and Schlieren papers likely have completely different sets of references, but the Schlieren papers likely overlap. So you can make a single bib file with every reference for every paper you'll ever write, but that would have hundreds of entries and would be a little more confusing to organize. So what I do, if we go into the bib files folder, is that I have a new library for each topic. So here I have a library for airplanes called Airplanes Bib, and here I have a library for Schlieren called Schlieren Bib. Now, if I keep my bib files in every paper's folder, then we can see the issues with the Schlieren bib file. So let's say I'm updating paper 1 and add a reference to this bib. If I then decide to work on paper 2 and want to include that reference, I would have to copy that reference from paper 1's bib file into paper 2's bib file. What would be easier is to have my libraries in the bib files as like a centralized bib files folder, and so I would have the Airplanes Bib and Schlieren Bib, and both my Schlieren papers would then use the Schlieren bib in this bib files folder, and we wouldn't need to worry about moving references around between files all the time. You can do whatever you want, but that's the way I'm currently working, and it seems to be going well. Let's first look at the citation key column, shown here. This is the key or string that you will use when you cite a paper in your LaTeX file by calling the cite command. I have a certain type of key name that I like to use. I like having the year first, followed by an underscore, followed by the first author's last name, and then optionally followed by the journal or conference, etc. Before we import anything, let's set this option by going to Options, Preferences, and then going to Citation Key, Generator. So right now, the default pattern is shown here. It's auth year. If you haven't edited anything yet, then the following rows will be empty. You can see that I filled a bunch of these with what I like, and they all begin with year_auth. For the articles, I need to specify the journal myself, so I don't add in the ending that you see in the others. But for books and conferences and the master's thesis and the PhD dissertation and the tech reports, I add the appended things to the end. And sometimes these work when importing, other times they don't. It has to do with how the imported citation's formatted. And as we'll see later, the .ris and .bibtex citations from AIAA import with different settings, so this is just a starting point. If it works, great. If not, you can edit the key after importing. Every site you import from is probably going to give you slightly different import results based on how they're formatted. So let's look at how AIAA does it. I'm going to navigate to the article I used in my Introduction to LaTeX video, found on the AIAA ARC site after searching for Schlieren. To download the citation, we click on Tools, go to Download Citation, and as noted in that video, there's a few options here. And so what we're going to do is just download the RIS and the BibTeX. So I'll download the RIS, and we'll download the BibTeX file. To import, we go to File, Import into current library, or you can press Control-I, and here you can see I've moved these from my downloads folder into here, although note that once you import them, you can just delete these files. You don't need them anymore. So here we have both the BibTeX file and the RIS file. So we'll start with the RIS file, double-click, make sure it's selected, press Import Entries. Things generally look okay here, and you'll see the citation key appears correct with the year followed by the first author's last name, followed by conf for conference. Under the entry type column, we can see that it's labeled as in collection, and for conference papers, I actually like using the in proceedings type, so we can change it by right-clicking, go to change entry type, BibTeX, and select in proceedings, and that's all fine. And to see more information about the entry, you can double-click, and it opens up down here. You can always X this out if you don't want to see it. So at the right in here, you can see an example of how the reference will be displayed, but I honestly don't pay attention to this because it will be displayed differently in your document depending on the style you use, and most journals also have their own styles that they incorporate. So you can see down here that there's a warning with this triangle, and it says, if you hover over it, it says capital letters are not masked using curly brackets. So let's see why this is important. We can check the actual PDF of the document, and so if you go up here, you can see that yes, all of these letters are actually capitalized, and if you look at the actual paper preview here, you can see they are capitalized. Sometimes these two don't match, but I always go by what's in the actual paper. So let's just run this example LaTeX file where I'm going to say let's cite a paper. Oops, I'll type the cite. It'll autocomplete to the citation that we have in the BibTeX file. And I will run the file and open it up in Sumatra PDF, and you can see that it accurately cites the paper, but the title does not have those capital letters that we want. So we need to go back into JabRef, and what you do is you enclose the letters that you want to be capital in curly braces, like it said in that warning message. And you don't have to do the first letter, but I always do it anyway. I save that, I go back into the LaTeX file, all I do is press Quick Build again, and if we open this back up now you can see those letters are capitalized. If we look at the authors field really quick, the current format's fine, but I like to write it as first name, last name, coincidentally one of my favorite F1 drivers, and separate them with the word and, as you can now see here. It won't change anything, but it avoids having to put all the commas and whatnot, and so to keep adding authors, just keep adding their names with an and in between, for as many authors as there are. So up in the journal book title column, you can see the conference name, but it looks like the book title field down here is empty. So if we go to the Other Fields tab, we can see where that column is coming from. But if I go to my LaTeX file here, or the PDF file, you can see the conference name is actually not included right now. So what we can do is copy this, bring it into the book title field under the required fields, press save, and if we run this file again, and we open up the document here, now we can see the conference name is included, but we still have this number 0 right here. So if I go back to here, that number 0 is coming in the optional fields, and you can see that right here. I'm just going to delete that, press save, go back in here, run the document again, open up here, and now you can see we have the conference name and there's no weird number 0. The main point I'm making here is that you'll just need to play around with the different fields in the bib file and see how it displays with the bibliography style you're using for your document. For that last example, we were using the RIS file for import, so now let's import the exact same citation but in BibTeX format. So we'll press Control-I to import into this library. We will select the appropriate file, so now it's the BibTeX file, open, select it, import the entries. We'll continue with import here. I know it's the same exact one. So this is the one that we just imported. And here that we see that there's no year. The citation key has no discernible format, and the entry type is in book. The reason that it doesn't have the citation key format for book is because it's not book, it's in book, which is different. So we can convert this to in proceedings like we did with the RIS file. So I right-click, change entry type, BibTeX, in proceedings, and here we can see that it automatically puts the conference name into the book title section, and the author list is in the format that I like. However, we still need to put braces around the capital letters in the title. We also need to add the year, for example, and I also need to change this citation key, if I can type, to what I like. Now the last thing is if we go to the optional tabs, or the optional fields tab here, we can see that it doesn't include any information like the RIS file does. But this was just the import from an AIAA conference, so let's look at the import from a different journal, such as Applied Optics, as an example. So I'm using this super recent document mainly because it's open access so that I can download the PDF and show you something later. But if you go over here, this is how you download citations from this website. Click on Get Citation, and down here you can see we can download the BibTeX or the RIS file. So let's import the RIS file first. I'll just Control-I, and it's the AO RIS file. Double-click. Make sure it's selected, import entries. Remember that in my import settings for articles, which is what this entry is, I only had year_auth, and so here I'm just going to manually add my journal abbreviation down here, _AO for Applied Optics. There is still an unbraced letter in the title here, which is why we get the warning, so we can brace that, and you see the warning goes away, and again, I always just brace the first one even though you don't need to for completeness. The author list is not in my preferred format, but that's okay, whatever. Now if we import the BibTeX file, so AO BibTeX file, select it, import, yeah that's fine, I know it's a duplicate. We can see that it looks extremely similar to the RIS file, right, except obviously that I have to add in my AO suffix here. There's only two differences between them. So first, the BibTeX file uses the author format that I like, same how it was in the AIAA example. And second, the BibTeX file includes the month in the optional fields tab, whereas the RIS file does not. So there's less differences between the BibTeX and the RIS file for the Applied Optics Journal citations, whereas for the AIAA, they were a little bit more different. So we just looked at how we could import by downloading a citation, but a really nice feature is being able to import using an article's DOI or a book's ISBN. So first let's look at the DOI. We can use our familiar AIAA example here, and you can see right here that there's this DOI link, and so you can copy this, go into your bibliography, I've deleted the other entries here, and you click on this button here, and down here you select DOI from this list, and in the ID box here we just paste it in, click generate, and we can see that the citation just pops in and we don't have to import anything, and this is super nice. And one thing that you'll note is that this already is in the correct entry type that I like. It already has the correct citation key that I like, and it has the author list in the format that I like. You still have to capitalize or brace the capital letters here, but this is my preferred method for imports if possible, although note that sometimes this method can fail. We can also import using an ISBN for books, for example. So here we are on Settle's Schlieren book page on Springer, and you can see here the ISBN, so I'm just going to copy that. We'll go back to our bib file in here. Under ID type, now we want this to be ISBN. We just paste that in, press generate, and there we go. You have the book reference added, and you can see it's in the title or in the citation key of my normal year, author, book. Again, you may need to edit some fields, but it's a quick way to create entries without having to download files and import. So you may notice that there are a few table columns that we haven't discussed yet that you can see over here. You might have noticed that it actually switched from 5 to 3, but that's because I forgot to revert to what you would see if you just open it up yourself. So there's 3 right here now. We'll discuss these, but first I want to add those 2 more columns. So what we'll do is we'll go to Options, Preferences, and Entry Table. And I want to add in some special columns. So make sure that Enable Special Fields is clicked here, or checked, and then down here we'll click and we'll do read status, and we'll add, and then we'll click on quality, and we will add that, and I will move quality all the way to the top, and then I'll do read status and make that the actual first column like that, and we'll click save, and you can see that we have those 2 extra columns added. So the first column is called read status, and you can set this to either nothing, read, or skimmed, and it's going to help you keep track of what you've actually looked through So we can set that one to skimmed, and we can set this one to red, and it's a little hard to see just because of the blue highlighting, but you can see that it'll help you keep track of your papers. You can always clear it as well. The next column is a really good one called quality right here, and it is either selected or it is not selected. Now, throughout this video, I've been mentioning that you may need to update the entry to have the correct information. So once I import an entry, I go through all the fields and check each one to make sure it's correct. You may think that all the information is going to be correct even if some is missing, but that's not always the case. For example, up until recently, whenever I imported any citation from AIAA, whether it was a journal article or a conference paper, the year field was the year that I downloaded the citation, which is obviously not what I wanted. It seems they've fixed this now, but it was something I had to change every time I imported from their site. So basically, don't always assume the imported citations are correct. After checking that the entry is completely good to go, I mark it with this quality symbol, and that way I know I don't need to check it again. And if an entry doesn't have this symbol, then I know I need to go through it and make sure it's correct before submitting my article. The next column is called group color, and we'll go over that in a second, but let's go first to the fourth column called linked files. And this is another great feature because it allows you to open up the article with a single click if you actually have the article. So let's link an article to one of our entries. Now let me add the paper citation again for the applied optics paper. So down here, we'll just do this with the DOI thing that we did before. We'll copy that, go in here, DOI, paste, and generate. Okay, now we have that article citation in here. I also have the paper downloaded in here in a paper, in a folder I call papers, and you can see I like it in the format that my citation key is, because this allows me to cross-reference when I'm writing papers and want to check the information in the references. So to link the file on the entry, we right-click and then go down to Attach File. We navigate to the PDF, double-click, and then click Apply, and you can see the icon appearing indicating that we do in fact have an attached file. And if you click on that, it will open up the PDF that you have. And so obviously you need to have the PDF on your computer, otherwise you won't be able to open it up. And so if you want to see where this linked file actually is, you can go to the General tab, and under the File option you can see the paper right here. If you want to unlink this, you can just press delete. You don't want to delete from disk, you could just remove it from the entry, and now it goes away. You'll just have to relink it again. So another thing is if you move the paper to a different directory, it'll say that it can't find it if you still have it linked there. You'll just have to delete that and then relink it again. And then this fifth column is the linked identifiers column. And so if there's a DOI or a URL associated with the entry, you can click this and it will take you to the article's location on the web. And so if I look at, like here, if you hover over it, it'll show the DOI link for these ones, for example. And if you just go to the General tab, you can see this is the DOI link. You can see that there's no URL. You can add the URL in if you want. Now, if I import, and I import the Applied Optics BibTeX file, for example, here you can see that there's a different symbol here, and if I click on it now, you can see there's both a DOI and a URL. I mean, they both lead to the same place, but essentially because there's both the DOI and the URL here, you can click this and then click whichever one you want. So one thing I found useful is using groups, which is why I kept this third column in the table. And to see the groups interface on the left, you'll see that it's a little bit different because I already had it up there because I forgot to revert to my default. But essentially you'll usually see this web option available first. So if we go to View, we want to click Groups Interface, and then we can just get rid of the web. So this groups interface here, there's nothing special since no groups are defined, except that it shows all the entries that we have right now. So what I like to do is group by journal, conference paper, book, tech report, thesis, and dissertation. Then within each group, you can have subgroups. For the journal group, my subgroups would be specific journals. Same thing for conferences. Maybe I would make a grad school group and then have the subgroups be the thesis and dissertations. This makes it easy to filter if you're just looking to read journal papers, or even if you just want to look for papers within a certain journal or conference, for example. So to add a group or a subgroup, click the plus button here, and then you'll enter the name of the group and you'll select a color. And I would stick with the same colors over all your libraries since it'll be easier for you to quickly recognize them. So let's create a journals group, and we'll color it blue because that's what I usually do, and we'll click OK. And now you can see this pops up with the color blue. And now if we want to add a subgroup to that group, simply right click, add subgroup, and I will call this one AO for applied optics, and I typically leave subgroups gray because otherwise you get like way too many colors and it's a little confusing. You can do what you want, obviously, and then we'll press OK, and now you can see there's a journals subgroup AO. And let's just quickly make a conferences group, so we'll do another one, we'll do conferences, and we can do this one like magenta, for example, and then we can do another group, and we'll call this one books, and we can do this as red, for example. And now we can just add these entries into the groups and subgroups by just dragging them in. So we'll take the applied optics, that's a journal, and it's also in the applied optics subsection. The book is obviously a book, and the conference paper is a conference paper. And you'll see numbers pop up here with how many are in these folders, and here you can see the colors. And so this is just how you can quickly identify which entries are which, and if you just want to look at the journal articles, then it'll filter them out. Same with the conference, same with the books, same with subgroups, and there's a lot more customization you can do here, but I use it for this type of simple organization. And the final thing I want to show you now is just how to update the bibliography in your LaTeX file if it doesn't auto-complete some entries that you think should be there. So for example, I just have two articles here. I have the conference paper and I have the applied optics paper. And if I go to my example file here and I type in cite, you'll see that those two options will pop up here, and we can select one of them or one or the other, and it'll cite that paper. So that's all well and good. And now let's say that we want to add a file in here, for example. So we'll do the book file. So we'll just, again, whoops, copy the ISBN, do our normal add ISBN, generate. Now we have the book in here. We can save that, and if we go into here, we can say cite, and that book is not there right now. If I go to BibTeX and I kind of recompile this a few times, sometimes you just need to do it multiple times, and I do cite, it's still not there. So what can you do? Well, you can go to edit, refresh bibliography, and then if we do cite again, now you can see the book pops up. So that's just something that you can do just in case you run into that issue. So there you have it, a general introduction to JabRef and how I use it. I hope that helps you get started with your reference organization. As I keep mentioning, there are so many more options that I didn't go over, so just tailor it to your own needs. Good luck, and thanks for watching.